YouTube, what's going on? This is Brian coming to you from the Perfect Gentleman podcast here in St. Louis, Missouri. Wanted to introduce ourselves real quick. I work in hospitality, I bartend, I serve, I manage restaurants as my professions. So right now I'm just waiting tables at a really nice restaurant here in St. Louis. And frankly, if you've ever waited tables before, you know that you don't need to see the day in and day out of what happens in a restaurant.
Doesn't ring a bell, sorry.
One of the video series that we're going to do is going to be centered around a vlog of the behind the scenes footage of a couple of different content creators that we're going to be collaborating with. One is one of my best friends. His name is Will. He has a channel called Will Shoot Guns. So I'm helping him do some of the camera work and some of the behind the scenes work on his channel. So we'll be doing a vlog kind of behind the scenes on that. One of the other videos that we're going to be doing a kind of a series of is just interesting conversations. So we've got kind of a conversation room here in the house. It's full of a bunch of my family's artwork and some of the art that I've collected over the years. And it's just a really nice cozy room to sit down and have a good conversation. So hopefully we'll be talking to some of my friends that have some interesting stories. We'll hopefully be talking to some strangers that have some really good stories and some things that we can learn from. Definitely appreciate what Gary Vee says about edutainment. It's like once you get the lesson and move on to the next topic, you don't. One of the things that I like to do is I'll just put on a content creator's channel that I like what they generally talk about, and I'll put that on as my background noise. So whether it's just using my channel for that, or whether you like the content, something that you can relate, you collect watches, you collect guns, you collect tech, you collect EDC gear. Maybe you're just a single guy who didn't have his shit together like I didn't for a long time. And we are going to talk about my addiction story. I do have a past. It wasn't so bright all the time. I definitely had a lot of fun in my late teens and early 20s, and then that caught up into my late 20s and early 30s. We're going to tell that story, but if you are struggling with addiction, or if you have somebody that you know is struggling with addiction, or whether your kids are 25 and they're grown kids, or whether they're 16 or 17 or 14 or 13 or 12, it's when my generation started doing all sorts of crazy stuff. It's when Gen X started doing all sorts of crazy stuff. So, whether it's a scare straight tactic or whether it's just something that you can relate to and something that you're going through right now, either way, I think hearing addiction stories are powerful. So I'm going to tell mine in a separate video series. And if that's not your content, you don't need to go watch it. And I think that there needs to be a lot more content creators who are doing a better job of just telling real life stories. You know what I mean? So we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to have some interesting and hopefully impactful conversations. But with that being said, let's get started on the story of kind of how we got here. All right. So first of all, like we're going to try to do on most videos, wrist check. So we right now have on a Manta Atlas. That is the local St. Louis brand. It is a GMT model. Absolutely beautiful. The Perfect Gentleman name in the title is just that I come from a line of guys who have done some pretty cool things, and they have a really funny, dry sense of humor, and we have a lot of fun with what we do. So my grandfather, you can see him, he's right back there in that painting, done by my grandmother. He was quite the character. He was my main male role model growing up. And so the joke in our family about the Perfect Gentleman was, for I believe it was our grandmother's, or my grandmother's, and my grandfather's silver anniversary. During the first couple of years of his retirement, they were doing different things. My grandfather was doing, or trying his hand, I should say, at a little bit of acting, which is kind of, if you knew my grandfather, it was in his character, but it wasn't something that we ever thought that theatrics was going to be something he would spend his retirement doing. So with that being said, he did a small role in a local theatrical play, and the play was titled The Perfect Gentleman. Now, I haven't gone back and done the research or found out much about that play, but I did go see it as a kid. I remember going to see it, and for his anniversary gift to my grandmother, for their silver anniversary, he had the playbill framed, and he had the cutout of the picture of the gentleman. In the playbill, it's just a cartoon character with a top hat and a suit and the like. Well, he decided to go rent a 3-piece suit, or went and bought a suit of some sorts. I don't know how he got it might have been his stage clothing, but Either way, he was in a top hat and fully dressed to the nines in black tie attire, and it was a picture of him smiling in his suit. And that was what he gave to my grandmother that year. That was the type of sense of humor we grew up with in my household. The joke hits true because he also was a stand-up guy. He owned his own business, or I should say was a partner in an advertising firm. He was the creative writer. He did a lot of local award-winning advertising writing. He had a massive perennial garden in his backyard that he would spend hours working on. He was the classic MadMen. He had a group of friends that he had for his entire life, and they remained friends to this day. My family is still friends with some of them. I still actually stay in touch with their grandchildren. I grew up with one of their grandchildren, and we still say hi to each other to this day on Facebook, or say happy birthday to each other on Facebook. So the lasting legacy of the perfect gentleman in my eyes is that my family did some pretty cool things. His father, my great-grandfather, was actually Henry Giesenbeer, the one who is credited with founding the Jaycees, or Junior Chamber International as it's known now, which is still headquartered here in St. Louis County out in Chesterfield. I've gotten lucky enough to sit on the local St. Louis City chapters board a handful of times. I'm recently starting to get back into some events with those guys, but my great-grandfather started a civic unity and young leadership development organization that has spanned the globe and has had, I don't know what the exact number is, but my guess would be millions upon millions upon millions of people worldwide that go to civic meetings and put on civic events with the hopes of teaching young people the leadership skills. Some of the former presidents of our country have been involved in the Jaycees. Some very notable celebrities, actors, musicians have been in the Jaycees. Really cool things that go along with that. I've gotten lucky enough to give a couple of short speeches at a couple of different events. I've hosted different events for the St. Louis chapter as the leading person on those projects, whether it was St. Louis Mardi Gras booths. I've been involved in the local soapbox derby a handful of years, which is always a fun time down on the hill. And I just think it's a pretty cool story. I mean, the heritage in my family, my mother's side, have all been stand-up guys who raised good families and helped out around their communities, and overall just tried to be a positive example. I think that post-COVID, my world flipped upside down because I work in hospitality. I work in restaurants, so that obviously changed a lot. But I spent a lot of time around the self-help world in the Amway business when I was in my late teens, fresh out of high school and going into college. So there was a lot of time that I spent watching, listening, going to conferences, watching speakers, reading self-help books. From a very young age, I posted a lot of stuff on Facebook back in when Facebook had notes. I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember that, but Facebook notes, I used to write essays about different things that I was learning in self-help and stuff like that. And I remember all my friends back then would just make fun of me because nobody else was doing that. I was trying to do something that I thought was cool, and because we were 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, all going out to bars still and all, yeah, I don't know. It never took off. It never did anything. So I kind of put that off to the side for a little while. But that was something, edutainment, whatever you want to call it, has its place in our world. And I feel like after the last couple of years of my life, I actually have lived enough to tell a story that might actually help somebody. So now that this is where the world is taking us with everything going online and the content creator space being what it is, I figured I'd dip my toes in it and give it a shot. So we're gonna tell some more stories about my grandfathers. We're gonna tell some more stories about kind of how that affected things, but really the point of the Perfect Gentleman name in the title is just that I come from a line of guys who have done some pretty cool things, and they have a really funny, dry sense of humor, and we have a lot of fun with what we do. So hopefully you guys will follow along and enjoy.